Music's always so loud back here. It's awkward. I had a question for you, now I forget what the question was. Macro is something that I've done a lot of different kinds of photography, and I've never really tried macro before.
It's so much fun.
It seems like it, like looking at your work, because I'm more of a landscape photographer. And when you said, I did the color grading of your video. So when watching the video, and when you said tiny landscape, I was like, oh, yeah. It just like, it clicked for me. It was really cool. And so now, yeah, when I'm looking at your work, I see that totally. It's kind of same concept. I've been shooting, I'd say for the majority of my career, it's been like ultra wide angle lenses, and recently it's like 70 to 200 with teleconverters, like really kind of compressing my shots and being nitpicky about my composition. So it's similar in that with macro, you're kind of really coming into something really tight.
Yep.
And so I see where I could kind of start maybe trying some stuff like that now.
And it's unlimited subject matter. That's what's so cool about it.
Hey everybody, what is going on? Welcome to On Your Guard, live with Mike Moats, who is a macro photographer, published macro photographer, based here in Michigan, and we're going to get some awesome information from him today. We're giving away a Havana 41 backpack. Again, 2 giveaways, 1 live giveaway that we'll do by the end of the show. All you have to do is drop us a comment, a question, something, and we're going to give away another one Sunday, Monday, just for somebody else who comments, and diving in here, Mike, let's talk a little bit about why macro photography. What started you out in photography? How long ago was it? Let's give us your origin story.
I started in 2001, so prior to that I didn't have any type of photography background or camera. And I just spent a lot of time out in the woods wandering around. I thought it'd be a good idea to have a camera to take pictures of some of the things I saw. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do as far as I did a little bit of landscape, a little bit of wildlife, and a little bit of macro. So in 2004, I was at Yosemite, and I was fighting for tripod space with about 50 other photographers. And I realized that I didn't really care to shoot that image at that particular time because everybody else was shooting the same thing. And it goes on 365 days in that same spot. So what I realized with my macro photography is that all my images are originals, because the subject matter that I photographed at the time was erased by the environment. It doesn't exist anymore. Wow. And so that's really important to me as an artist and a photographer, that I have original images that nobody else has. The other issue was in the Detroit area where I live, north of Detroit, there's not a lot of landscape. That's really good. You got a few shots, but you're not going to do this 52 weeks out of the year. And it cost me a lot of money to travel to do landscape. So what I realized, I've got 4 parks within 20 minutes of my home, and I can make a living just shooting in those 4 parks with macro, because it's just unlimited. There's so much subject matter. That's really cool. And so that's why I decided I want to be the best at macro photography I could be by dedicating all my time and energy into being the best macro photographer. That's cool. Yeah, macro, I mean, I've been a photographer for, 10 or 11 years now, and it's like kind of the one area, we kind of talked briefly about it, that I haven't ever tried before, really, because I mean, it takes specialized equipment to do it and to do it right. But when you always say something, which is what we're going to get into next, you call your subjects tiny landscapes, which I thought was awesome, because I never really thought about it that way. So when I'm looking at your work now, I see that, and it's appealing to me. Whereas before I was thinking macro. I just don't see myself finding a spot. One of the problems with macro is when you tell someone you're a macro photographer, they think of flowers and bugs all the time. And there's just so much other subject matter outside of flowers and bugs. And so I've learned all these different areas in the parks where I shoot of all the different types of subject matter outside of flowers and bugs. Not that I don't do flowers and bugs, but you want to expand into other areas. And so that's been what's been successful for me, is not so much the flowers and bugs, but all the other things that I photograph. No, that's cool. I like that. I mean, you touched a little bit on that, but I know one of your biggest kind of
goals, or not necessarily a goal, but your focus is creating art versus documenting a subject. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I did a podcast on the Candid Frame, and the guy who was interviewing me said, he goes, you know, when I view macro photography, it looks documented to me, and when I view your photography, it looks artistic. And I said, and I
show a little bit of Mike's work here too.
That made me feel really good, because that's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to create art with the subjects that I photograph. So. Documenting would be something you would see maybe in a flower photography book or identification book, you know, where they're showing the flower, they're showing the environment that it's in, they're showing all the clutter and all that, or possibly just shooting a flower in the top third of the frame with a stem under it.
Right.
Most boring composition you can come up with. Coming in at a different angle or shooting it in a way that creates an artistic form of the petals and the textures and the lines and all that, rather than just shooting a standard flower shot. So when I go to set up my camera, I'm always thinking in those terms. Am I creating something artistic here, or am I just documenting the subject? Yeah. And sometimes you don't think when you set up that on the first shot. And then when you really, you know, go over that in your mind, am I creating something artistic, then I might end up changing the angle of the subject or finding a different way to photograph that subject. A lot of people just shoot a flower straight on. Many times they don't realize the backside of the flower can be interesting, or the side view of a flower can be interesting. So there's a lot of different ways we can be artistic when we're shooting macro.
That's cool. I mean, like I said, macro is not really ever something that I've thought about before, but just hearing you talk about it, the possibilities are really endless when it comes to macro, because you can zoom in and infinite.
Exactly.
And that's crazy to me. Just something that I've never really thought about before. You talk a lot about like going to these different parks that are nearby. Talk about finding your inspiration in like unexpected places.
Well, for years I tried to capture a lily pad, a shot of a lily pad. But the parks where I go to, the lily pads are just kind of brown, and they're bugs all over them, and it just don't look good. Yeah. And so I've never found a really clean, nice composition of a lily pad in the parks by my house. So I was out in Cleveland, and a friend of mine who lives in the Akron, Cleveland area had invited me to stay at his house, go shoot in the Cuyahoga National Park. And we had come back after a nice downpour of rain. We come back to his home, and I was out in the backyard, which his wife has planted all these beautiful flowers, and there's this big row of arborvitaes in the back. And so I walked around these arborvitaes. There was a big raised box with water and these beautiful, pristine lily pads. And I've been searching for lily pads for years, right? And I'm shooting these lily pads. Now, 100 feet from this box that I'm shooting, there's a side of a 40,000 square foot mansion, and that mansion is owned by LeBron James, the basketball player. So you never know where you're going to find a great shot.
That's
so it's a great story for that shot that I'd been waiting years and years to get, and here it is 100 feet from LeBron James's house. Wow. So you never know where you're going to find a great subject.
That is really cool.
And that's what I say, it's so unlimited. It can pop up anywhere. You just never know.
Just interesting, finding interesting light and shadows. That's what I love about looking at your work, is you can tell that a lot of your artistic mind goes into your compositions and finding interesting light and textures that really guide your eye through an image.
Yeah, and everything that I shoot is done with natural light too. So I don't use any flash systems. It's just whatever light is available, that's what I'm working with.
Which is why a tripod is good. We're going to get to that. I'm going to announce again that we're giving away this Havana 41, 2 of them. We're going to give away one by the end of the broadcast. Just drop us a comment, ask us a question, something, and you're automatically entered to win. You'll find out when we end. And then we're going to give another one away at the end of the weekend. Just pick another person at random to win another one. This bag's really good because it's inconspicuous. It doesn't really look like a photo bag. You have a well-padded compartment for your gear. You have a personal compartment up top, a rain cover, spot for a 13-inch laptop. It's a really good all-around, soft, inconspicuous bag. So let's get back to Mike. So we talked a lot about the subject matter, how you came to be a macro photographer. Let's talk about gear a little bit. What kind of gear are you using?
Well, the great thing about macro photography is you don't need an expensive DSLR. I have a D7000 Nikon camera. That's like 6 years old. Okay. And I don't have any need to upgrade it. It takes great images. My most successful image I ever shot with was a Fuji S2 in 2004. That's my most successful of all my images. So you don't need an expensive SLR to shoot macro photography, because we don't require high frames per second.
Yep.
We don't require really high ISO with low noise, and so that doesn't affect us at all. So we don't have to spend a lot of money. I use all Tamron lenses, macro lenses, and I use their 16-300, which is a nice zoom and also has some macro capability. Using reflectors and diffusers to kind of control the light. That's one of the great benefits we have as macro photographers. Landscape photographers, wildlife has no control over the light, where we have control because we're shooting small areas. So we use reflectors and diffusers and things like that. And then the tripod that I use is the Vanguard new and the Alta Pro 2, which is really awesome. I love the new one. Tripod. Would you like to see that now? 1
second, we have a question.
Okay.
We have a question from Anne Marie. Do you prefer sunlight or more of an overcast kind of light?
Well, sunlight, I'm going to diffuse my subject 100% of the time. So anytime that sun is hitting my subject, it could possibly blow out colors. It could create shadows in areas where I don't want shadows. And so I'm going to diffuse 100% of the time. I use a 12-inch diffuser. That's the largest one that I use because we're shooting small areas. And on cloudy days, even cloudy days, you can lose colors. It can blow out colors. So even on cloudy days, I have to use a diffuser on some flower shots and that. So I have to carry that diffuser whether it's sunny or cloudy. I always have it with me.
And one more from Ashveer. He mentioned that a lot of photographers, macro photographers, might lose themselves and be out for hours and hours. Do you have a strict amount of time that you go out and keep yourself to, or is that ever?
I can only handle about 2 hours when I go out.
Okay.
my brain gets on overload after 2 hours. Literally, I mean, I can do about 2 hours and I'm done. So yeah, some people I know can go all day, but that's not me. I usually, it's about a 2-hour time span, and then I gotta, my brain's fried.
Tony Porter wants to know, do you find macro ring flash lights work well?
I never use ring flashes, never use any type of flash. One of the problems with flash systems is they tend to just shoot straight ahead. Some of them you can come in at angles, but I found that just using natural light works the best. And I use LED lights, so I can handhold an LED light around my subject and see the light prior to shooting it, opposed to using a flash where I have no idea how it's going to affect the subject until I actually photograph it. Yeah. And then I might have to readjust that light and re-photograph it. But with an LED light, I can maneuver it around my subject and photograph it and see exactly how the light is affecting it before I actually take a shot.
That's cool. I mean, not macro related, but I used to use flash a lot, and I found myself, one of my biggest things was I found myself getting to the point where it's like I had to have a light, and if I didn't have a light, then I couldn't, and I hated that tether. Yeah. So for me, the shift to just focusing on natural light stuff, and if I need a light, like you said, an LED or something here and there, like perfect, but I just like to be untethered and not have to carry.
And the little LED lights are very inexpensive compared to a flash system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the new Alta Pro 2 Plus.
Oh yeah.
We got one to demo here for us, and why you think it's a great setup for macro photography.
Well, the one thing about macro photography is we're always maneuvering our cameras into strange, weird places. You know, we're many times down on our hands and knees, and so this allows the tripod, we can take the legs straight out, and that'll get us right down. And then if the center post is in the way, we can always raise that up, and it tilts out. And that's the great thing about this tripod, and then it pans back and forth. Very easy to use because the older version had a little button you had to push here to get it up through the center, and it was a little bit
cumbersome.
Yeah, inconvenient. Yeah. It would work good, still worked okay, but it was a little bit harder to work with. Now we can just pop it up, go horizontal, and it's so much better. And then we can lock it down. You know, we can get it in whatever position we need to get it into and lock her down. And that's the nice thing about this is it goes up and down, where some of the other competitors, their tripod goes straight out, and if we want to move the camera up and down, we got to do it with all three legs.
Right.
And so this allows us to do that. They also went to the quarter turn twist legs here rather than the flip.
Yep.
And one of the problems with the flips were that they tend to expand and contract, and so you always had to be tightening
or loosening.
Yeah, because they would slip.
Right.
So this is a style that doesn't do that. And I love that it's just a quarter turn, because one of the things that bothered me about some of the older tripods that I've ever tried with the twist is that they'd have to do 2 and 3 twists to
Yep.
open, 2 and 3 twists to tighten it down. So much, much better. I love the look of the new tripod. I think it's just so cool. It has kind of an industrial gray look to it, really, really nice, and it's got little yellow lines here with numbers so that you can see the different positions. So the leg can go all the way out, then it can go to here, and it can stop here, and then upright. So it has a lot of different nice features.
I think precision's a good word. It's very precise in what you can do with it.
Yeah, I love the new tripod. I'm just so happy with the way it came out. And then their ball heads, they've upgraded the ball head. So like this SB100, it's gone to which is really nice, I like, is the Arca Swiss mounting plate. That's really good, because a lot of people have L brackets on their cameras, and so that wouldn't work on the older model.
Exactly.
So that's a great upgrade. And then again, the controls and everything with the rubber, little rubber around the controls gives you a really good grip. It's kind of textured, so it grips really well. Just an awesome head too.
Awesome.
Yeah, love it.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. I know even me as a photographer, and all the photographers that are out here watching, like, you're a published photographer.
Yeah.
Been published a lot.
Yeah.
How do you get published?
In 2004, it was my brother actually that said, you've got some nice images, maybe you should try and see if you can get them published in a magazine. And so my goal was to try to get an image published in a magazine. That was just a goal. I sent off 20 images to Outdoor Photographer magazine, and one of them got published in Outdoor Photographer magazine. I actually bought a book. John Shaw, back in 2004, had a book on the business of nature photography, and I bought that, and he showed how to write out a query letter, and so I copied his query letter right out of his book, and I sent in an article to Outdoor Photographer magazine to the editor, who was Rob Shepard at the time, and said, I want to do an article on photographing leaves. And it was something they've never done before, so they called and said, we want to do your article. And so that was the first time I got published. And then I sent off articles to other magazines and started getting published. Now, you don't necessarily get a lot of images published in magazines. They want articles.
Yeah.
And so I realized that I was lucky on that first attempt, but I needed to write more articles if I wanted to get more published. And basically just send them to the editors. Most magazines have some kind of guidelines of how to enter articles or images, and typically they go to the editor. The editor reviews them and decides what's going to be put in the magazine. So it's pretty simple. It's not that complicated.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I've heard people say, well, look at these magazines, and I got better images than those people, the people that are into magazines. Have you ever submitted any of yours to magazines? Well, no. Well, there you go. You're never going to get published if you don't submit anything, right? Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you brought up a good point with just being able to write too. I feel like it goes. I mean, if you want to be a photographer, you can't just be able to take good pictures. You have to have a decent business sense. You have to have a certain amount of things. So
yeah, and I'm a horrible writer. I'm going to tell you that. I hate writing.
But I bet you're better. You are. I bet you're better now.
Better now than I was when I submitted that first article to Outdoor Photographer. I hadn't actually written the article when I submitted the idea for the article, and so when they contacted me and said they were going to publish it, I had to now write it.
Yeah.
I'd never written an article in my life. I mean, I was lucky to get D's when I was in high school in English, okay? So my wife is in education, so I figured, well, I'll write the article and let her review it before I send it off. So I wrote this whole article out, 1,500 words, that's what they required, and I showed it to my wife, and she looks at it and she goes, you don't even have paragraphs. I'm like, so what is a paragraph? I literally didn't know what a paragraph was. And so this is how I work. I'm going to try to attempt to do this without even knowing what I'm doing. Yeah. And my wife kind of restructured it and put it in paragraphs, and I sent it off to Rob. And I didn't hear from him for a few weeks, and I thought, geez, he's probably looking at it and thinking, I can't publish this thing, And so I emailed Rob, and I says, Rob, is that article okay? He says, yeah, everything's fine. Now, the one thing John Shaw said in that book, too, and what I've found out is, because I just did an article for Outdoor Photographer, it was in the April issue. Okay. And the new editor at Outdoor Photographer had rewritten, and I had told him up front, I says, look, I'm not a great writer, so if you see things that you need to rewrite or the structure of the sentences is not right, go ahead, you're free to go ahead and rewrite. And they did. There was a lot of stuff that they kind of changed a little bit here and there, and it makes it better writing because I'm not a really good writer.
Yeah.
The information is good, but it just wasn't put in the right structure, So they'll help you out with stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's good because not everybody's a great writer.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's good information. So kind of along that same vein, you're sponsored by Tamron.
Yep.
You're a Vanguard Pro
Yep.
ambassador. So how does the process of getting a sponsor look?
Well, I was actually, in 2004, I started with that GS2, and I was posting images on a lot of critique sites and that. And somebody at Fuji saw my images being published and saw I was using a Fuji S2. And so Fuji contacted me out of the blue, emailed me and says, hey, we'd be interested in having you shoot with our S3, which was the next version that was coming out. I says, well, that's great, but I don't want to buy another camera. No, we'll send you a camera. You just shoot images. So I got onto their pro talent team and got sponsored by Fuji, and then they had told me that they had connections with the people over at Tamron, and so why don't you contact Tamron and see if you can get hooked up with them for lenses, and so that's what I did, and then I got sponsored by Tamron. So basically, if you're looking to get involved with companies for sponsorship, usually you contact somebody in the marketing department at those companies and ask them if they do any sponsorships. Now, in order to get sponsored, you kind of have to be somebody that's out there kind of working it pretty full time or somewhat of a pro, and you need to be in front of people. You need to be doing workshops, you need to be at photo conferences, you need to be blogging every day, you need to be on Facebook, you need to be on all social media, and you need a following.
Yeah.
Because nobody wants to sponsor if you can't promote and sell their products.
Yep.
That's the whole point. So you got to be a good photographer, that's number one, and then you have to have a good following, you have to be out there promoting products,
Right.
and then you're going to have companies that'll be willing to sponsor you. But if you're just a guy out there working by himself and you're not doing workshops, you're not really out there in social media, and you call a company and say, will you sponsor me? Well, they're not going to sponsor you.
No. Yep. That's
Yeah.
great information. You mentioned workshops, and I know you do a lot of workshops. Photography is Mike's primary source of income.
Yep.
When did you get started? When did you put on your first workshop? And
Well, I actually started out in the art show business.
Okay.
So about 3 years after I started in 2001 and 2004, I started entering art shows, and I did about 25 shows a year, and I was doing really well in the art shows, but they only lasted, in the Midwest here from May through September.
Okay.
And so the rest of the year I had nothing to do if I wanted to do this as a full-time business. So I started offering workshops in Southeast Michigan, and I was collecting names from people that were coming into my art shows, and I had a little sign in the booth there, macro workshops, and I had 1,000 names on a mailing list in the first year after those art shows.
Wow.
So I started sending out letters to these people, and I was starting to fill up workshop and filling them up one after another. I've done probably between 40 and 50 workshops in Southeast Michigan.
Wow.
So eventually you run out of people in that area, right? And then I realized that if I'm going to keep this going as a full-time business doing workshops, I'm going to have to go outside of Michigan. And now the art shows, after about 7 years, sales were dipping down. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to need to move on. Sales aren't that good in the art shows, so I'm going to start doing more education, more teaching. And I started putting my workshops into states where I was getting a lot of sales for ebooks, because I had an ebook out online, and I was getting a lot of sales. And so I was looking at the states where I was getting most of my sales from. And California was one of the big ones that I was getting a lot of emails and information needed for macro photography, and also selling a lot of ebooks. So I scheduled my first workshop outside of Michigan in Carlsbad, California, north of San Diego.
Yep.
And it sold out in about a month or so. That sold out,
Wow.
and I had enough people on a wait list to fill up a second one. So
Wow.
I contacted the hotel. I says, can I get the room again for the following weekend? They said yes. So I sold out my first 2 workshops when I went outside of Michigan. And then I started to go into other areas where, again, I was getting a lot of ebook sales from, and putting them in different locations near major cities where there's a big population of people.
Yep.
And I think I did something like 35 workshops sold out before I finally had one that didn't sell out.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's got to be a
traveling around.
good confidence booster.
Oh,
just
yeah.
To get...
But a lot of that came through all the marketing I did for
Yeah.
years on the internet. And if it wasn't for the internet, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. Prior to the internet, if you wanted to get known as a pro photographer, you had to have a book on a shelf in a bookstore.
Right.
That's how you found out, that's how I found out who photographers were, Art
Right.
Wolf and John Shaw and the guys that I bought books that were in the bookstores. Other than that, you had no way of knowing these people that were across the country that were pro photographers. Now with the internet And with a good marketing system, you can really get your name out there and do really well. So when I started in 2004 on the internet, I was literally pounding the internet with my images every day. And any site I could find to put my images out there, I would throw them out there and keep them going every single day. Started blogging every single day. And so all these places like Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and all those places where you can post images, Flickr, naturephotographers.net, naturescapes.net, all those critique sites, just putting images out there. So people were seeing you, recognizing your name as you were putting these images out, and then all of a sudden they start following you, and then next thing you know, you're coming to their town to do a workshop, and they sign up for it. But it takes every single day, 365 days. You got to be out there.
I think, and that's kind of one of the misconceptions now is people just think, well, if I can just build a big Instagram following, or if I can build a big following here on this social media platform, like, then I've made it. But there's so much work that goes into it, and that's, I mean, not everybody talks about that sort of thing. You know, and how much work goes into being a working pro.
And I've had photographers that say, hey, I'd like to do what you do and do this full time, so what do I need to do? Well, you know, start blogging every day, start getting on all these different sites and posting your images on a daily basis, and communicate with other photographers, and maybe even help other photographers by giving information on a blog that helps them, and that'll keep them coming back to you, okay? But you got to do it every single day. And so I see them start out every day, and then after a couple months, you don't see them every single day, maybe every other day, and then after about 6 months, you don't see them at all, because they realize that this is a lot of work. And so after about 6 months, they go, this isn't really going as fast as I'd like it to, because they want it to happen right away. You know, it takes years of doing that before it really happens. And when I started out, I was just doing it because it was fun. I just loved being out there communicating with photographers and talking to photographers and posting my images. And so it was a fun thing. The other thing is that most photographers and artists, especially when I was in the art show business, knowing all the artists that I ran into, they don't like the business side. All they want to do is their art, but they don't want to do the business side, and that's where we make the money. That's how the business survives, is running the business. Now, I'd been in 2 businesses prior to this one for over 20 years, and so I kind of had the business sense, and I love doing marketing, so that's fun to me. So the business side for me is as fun as the photography side. And when you merge those two together, you can be successful. But if you don't like the business side, you're going to have a real struggle trying to make this into a full-time business.
I agree.
We have a winner.
Oh, we have a winner for our first Havana bag.
Lanny Brown.
Lanny Brown
California.
from California.
All right.
You have won the Havana 41. For those of you who didn't win, you also have another chance to win, so just throw us a comment, a question, something. We'll announce another winner Sunday or Monday. But this Havana bag is also on promo right now, so if you check out your favorite retailer or vanguardworld.us, it's $69.99, so mark down. Awesome bag. Thanks so much for joining us, Mike. This has been awesome. A lot of great information here. Anybody had questions that we didn't get to, ask them, and we'll answer you on Facebook. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Donut Day!
Happy Donut Day!
Donut Day.